For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a future and hope. This verse, Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, is the first thing I said in front of this public speaking class this year. With Miss Clark's frequent corrections, I struggled to read this verse that has always been one of my favorites. One of the reasons it is my favorite is because Marcus Lattimore chose it as his favorite. He read it in a Facebook video made by one of his teammates on the Carolina football team as a part of a school project. Each player had to pick a verse. No two players could pick the same verse, and Marcus Lattimore chose Jeremiah 29, verse 11. So I chose it too. You see, he's one of my heroes, and not just because he was great at football on my favorite team. When you hear his story in his own words, as he told it in a sermon he delivered at St. John's United Methodist Church in Aiken, South Carolina last February, you will see why I admire him and why his verse is so important to him and so inspirational to me. But first, some of you in this room might have heard of Marcus Lattimore, but for those of you who have not, don't worry. I will tell you about him. Marcus Lattimore was born on October 29th, 1991, and he grew up in Duncan, South Carolina, in the upstate near Greenville. He was a shy kid who began playing organized sports when he was 7 years old, mostly because his friends were playing. He played and excelled at baseball, basketball, and football. Growing up, he didn't pull for a college team or an NFL team. He pulled for his high school team, Burns High School. He looked up to those hometown heroes, high school athletes, and aspired to be one. And he was. During his high school football career, Burns won 2 state championships, and he became the most sought-after recruit in the country. He signed with the University of South Carolina and began a very promising college career. He was named the National Freshman of the Year in 2010, and in his sophomore year, early on, he was predicted as the Heisman favorite. For those of you not so into football, that's the award for being the best player in college football. His dreams were coming true. His plans were all working out. But then everything changed. Marcus Lattimore was injured in a game. He had to sit out a season, he rehabbed and came back, and the next year, he looked to dominate again. But in the Tennessee game, ironically, just minutes after the announcer commented on his looking like his old self, it was actually in the second quarter with 4 minutes and 57 seconds left in the half, Marcus Lattimore sustained an injury that was devastating. He takes a handoff, is tackled, and doesn't get up. The stands are silent. The announcers are silent. It's bad, and everyone knows it. This injury was the beginning of the end of Marcus Lattimore's football career, of his dream, of his plan for his life. Fortunately, Marcus Lattimore had his faith to sustain him. He is a man of God who firmly believes that God strategically placed people in his life that shaped him to deal with his adversity and discover the real purpose of his life. Martin Luther King Jr. said, and it's actually on the wall of the Carolina men's basketball weight room, I've seen it, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but where he stands in moments of adversity. The way Marcus Lattimore responded to the adversity in his life, far more than his performance on the field, make him an inspiration to others. Hear his story now in his own words. I get to Carolina my freshman year. I go speak at an elementary school, and I met a little girl who would change my life forever. We were playing games, and at the end of the games, they had the opportunity to ask a question. Everybody was asking, how's it feel to be a football player? How was it in this game, that game, all this? And the last question I get was from a little girl sitting in the back. She raised her hand and said, Marcus, how do you balance schoolwork, playing football, and being a Christian? And this little girl was 9 years old who asked me that. And I gave her a bullcrap answer because I wasn't a Christian. I was saying I was a Christian. I would put it on social media, put it on Facebook, Instagram, throw a Bible verse up there every now and again, but I wasn't living the way I was brought up. I went home and cried, and that next Sunday, I got saved because I knew what kind of impact I had. I knew I had to be right. I had to do it right. Little did I know, the next 2 or 3 years, my life would be turned completely upside down. My sophomore year going into it, I'm first in the Heisman. Going into the Mississippi State game, tear my ACL, season over with. 4 months later, my grandmother passes away. 2 months later, my grandfather passes away. My grandmother and grandfather passes away in the span of 6 months. And these were people I was very close with, people I would spend time with all the time. And as you know, the Tennessee game, 5 months later after that, I dislocated my right knee. I know that football window is closing, the game I love, closing real quick. This is not good. It's not. My coach gives me a journal, and it has a verse on it, Romans chapter 8, verse 28. I read it, but I didn't understand it. I get back up. A lot of people encouraged me. A lot of prayer probably came from this room, and I get back up and try football one more time. I get drafted to the 49ers in the 4th round. As Pastor Tim said, I never fully gained back that ability, so I retired. Football is over with. My career is over with. This is not good, I thought. This is why I'm here. That's what I thought. But I keep my faith, I trust in the Lord, and I keep praying. I pray, and I pray, and I pray. Fast forward 14 months later, I walk into a restaurant right there on Forest Drive in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm about to go get some lunch. I open the door, and a lady sees my face. She had to be in her late 70s, and she starts crying. She breaks down. The owner of the restaurant is about to call the ambulance because they didn't know what was wrong with her. We pick her back up, and she says she can't believe it's me. And she says, "Thank you for your witness. I'm not a football fan. I don't watch football, but I see all the things you do for others." At that moment, after all I went through at that moment, I realized it wasn't about me playing in the NFL, because my plan was to go first round, get drafted in the first round, have an amazing rookie season. I wanted to be Offensive Rookie of the Year. I wanted to be MVP. After that, I want to play in the Super Bowl, rush for 10,000 yards, be in the Hall of Fame one day. That was my plan. That was my goal. It was always about me. And at that moment, when I left that restaurant, I realized it was never about me in the first place. It took me 24 years. It was never about me. It was about His kingdom and bringing others to His kingdom. And it's the best feeling in the world. Nothing can top it. It hit me. Just because the game of football ends doesn't mean you can't make an impact. I work side by side with my old coach, Coach Bentley, shaping young men today. God strategically placed people in my life. It's the only reason I'm standing here today, and He's used me for His glory, and that's why I'm here. That's my purpose on this earth. All the pain I endured is worth it, and I wouldn't change one thing that happened because I found my purpose through it all. When you pray to God like I do every night, He's either going to give you 3 answers: yes, not yet, or I have something better in mind. I think He had something better in mind for me, and He can do the same for you if you just stay faithful. Today, Marcus Lattimore is recently named the head football coach at Heathwood Hall. He works with young people on the football field, and he serves youth leagues, parents, and high school and college student athletes through the Marcus Lattimore Foundation. His foundation emphasizes Christian values, character, life skills, education, health and welfare, highlighting the virtues of chastity, temperance, charity, diligence, patience, kindness, and humility. He is using his life in God's service to and with others. Marcus Lattimore inspires me to pray and listen for God's plan for me. I know He has one. He has one for all of us. And maybe it's not the same plan that we have for ourselves. We'll have to see. In this sermon, Lattimore calls God the great chemist. He says God can take things that are bad or disappointing, even tragic, and in the midst of His wisdom and love, work them together for good. But we have to have faith, and as he said in his final words of this sermon, we have to keep looking up. I started today with a Bible verse, and I will end with one here. In the sermon, Marcus mentions a journal his coach gave him after his injury. It had a verse on it, Romans chapter 8, verse 28. He said he read it, but he didn't understand it at the time. He doesn't tell us what the verse says in the sermon, so I looked it up. Let this verse be our closing prayer. Will you bow with me? And now we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose.